Welcome to Fact Frenzy Buzz. Today we're diving into the darker side of science. While scientific experiments have led to incredible discoveries, some have crossed ethical boundaries, leaving behind a legacy of controversy and horror. In this video, we'll explore 20 of the most disturbing science experiments in history that will make you question just how far science should go. Viewer discretion is advised, as some of these stories are truly shocking. Let's get started. In 1971, psychologist Philip Zimbardo conducted the Stanford Prison Experiment, where college students were assigned roles as guards or prisoners in a simulated prison. What started as a role play quickly spiraled into a nightmare. The guards became increasingly sadistic, while the prisoners suffered emotional breakdowns. The experiment was cut short after just 6 days, but it remains one of the most infamous studies of human behavior and the corrupting influence of power. In the 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram sought to understand how ordinary people could commit atrocities under orders. Participants were instructed to administer electric shocks to a learner whenever they made a mistake. Despite hearing cries of pain, many participants continued to deliver shocks, simply because an authority figure told them to. This experiment revealed disturbing truths about obedience and the potential for cruelty in all of us. In 1920, John B. Watson and Rosalie Rayner conducted an experiment on an infant known as Little Albert to study conditioned emotional responses. They exposed him to a white rat while simultaneously making loud, frightening noises. Over time, Little Albert developed a fear of the rat and eventually anything white and furry. The experiment was a landmark in behaviorism, but it was also highly unethical, leaving the child with lasting psychological scars. Fact 4. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study, a shameful chapter in medical history. From 1932 to 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service conducted the Tuskegee Syphilis Study, where African American men with syphilis were deliberately left untreated, even after a cure became available. The purpose was to study the progression of the disease, but the participants were never informed of their condition or given treatment. This unethical study resulted in the suffering and death of many participants and is a stark reminder of the importance of informed consent in medical research. Fact 5. Unit 731, Japan's secret biological warfare program. During World War II, Japan's Unit 731 conducted horrifying experiments on prisoners of war, including vivisections, frostbite testing, and the deliberate infection of diseases. Thousands of men, women, and children were subjected to these gruesome experiments, which were carried out under the guise of medical research. The atrocities committed by Unit 731 are among the most disturbing war crimes in history, and many details remained hidden for decades. Fact 6. The Monster Study, Stuttering in Children. In 1939, speech pathologist Wendell Johnson conducted what is now known as the Monster Study on orphaned children to investigate the origins of stuttering. Half of the children were subjected to negative speech therapy, where they were harshly criticized for any speech imperfections. The experiment left lasting psychological damage on the children, some of whom developed speech problems as a result. The study's name reflects the monstrous nature of the methods used. Fact 7. The Nazi Medical Experiments, Horrors of the Holocaust. During the Holocaust, Nazi doctors performed horrific medical experiments on prisoners in concentration camps. These included freezing experiments, chemical injections, and surgeries without anesthesia. The victims, often Jews, Romani people, and others deemed undesirable by the Nazis, were subjected to unimaginable suffering. These experiments were not only unethical but also a gross violation of human rights, and they remain a dark chapter in the history of medicine. Fact 8. The Aversion Project Conversion Therapy in South Africa. During the apartheid era in South Africa, the military conducted the Aversion Project, aimed at curing homosexuality among soldiers. Participants were subjected to electroshock therapy, chemical castration, and even forced sex change operations. The Aversion Project was a gross violation of human rights, targeting individuals based on their sexual orientation and subjecting them to inhumane treatments under the guise of medical research. Fact 9. Harry Harlow's monkey experiments, the dark side of love and attachment. In the 1950s and 60s, psychologist Harry Harlow conducted a series of experiments on rhesus monkeys to study maternal attachment. He separated infant monkeys from their mothers and offered them surrogate mothers made of wire and cloth. The monkeys preferred the comfort of the cloth mother, but the experiments left many of them deeply disturbed, exhibiting signs of depression and social dysfunction. Harlow's work revealed the importance of love and comfort, but at a significant ethical cost. Fact 10. The human zoo exhibitions displaying people as animals. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, human zoos were exhibitions where indigenous people were displayed as curiosities alongside animals. These exhibitions, which took place in Europe and the United States, were deeply racist and dehumanizing, treating people as objects for entertainment. The individuals on display were often taken from their homelands and subjected to humiliating conditions, stripped of their dignity and humanity. Fact 11. The Mangala Experiments, the Angel of Death. Josef Mengele, known as the Angel of Death, was a Nazi doctor who conducted grotesque experiments on prisoners at Auschwitz. His experiments included injecting chemicals into children's eyes to change their color, sewing twins together, and other horrific procedures. Mengele's work was a perversion of science, driven by twisted ideology rather than any legitimate medical purpose. His experiments are a chilling reminder of the depths of human cruelty. Fact 12. The military psychic spying program, Project Stargate. In the 1970s and 80s, the US government conducted a top-secret program known as Project Stargate, which aimed to investigate the use of psychic abilities for military purposes. Participants were trained to use remote viewing to gather intelligence from afar. While the program produced some intriguing results, it was ultimately deemed inconclusive and shut down. The idea of using psychic powers for espionage remains a strange and controversial chapter in military history. Fact 13. The Electroshock Therapy Experiments, a shocking treatment. Electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT, was widely used in the mid-20th century to treat various mental health conditions, often without patient consent. Patients were subjected to electric shocks that induced seizures which were believed to reset the brain. While ECT is still used today in a much safer and more controlled manner, its early applications were often brutal, leading to memory loss, trauma, and in some cases death. The history of ECT serves as a reminder of the fine line between treatment and torture. Fact 14. The MKUltra program, mind control experiments. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA conducted a secret program known as MKUltra, aimed at developing mind control techniques. The program involved administering drugs like LSD, along with hypnosis and sensory deprivation, to unwitting participants. The goal was to explore the possibilities of controlling human behavior, but the experiments were highly unethical, often leaving participants with lasting psychological damage. MKUltra remains one of the most infamous covert operations in US history. Fact 15. The Speaker's Core Experiments, when language breaks down. In the mid-20th century, researchers conducted a series of experiments known as the Speaker's Core to study the effects of sensory deprivation on language. Participants were isolated in soundproof chambers, deprived of any auditory or visual stimuli. Over time, many began to lose their ability to speak coherently, demonstrating the critical role that social interaction plays in maintaining language skills. The experiments highlighted the devastating effects of isolation on the human mind. Fact 16. The Psychic Driving Experiments, Breaking the Mind. Psychiatrist Dr. Ewan Cameron conducted the psychic driving experiments in the 1950s, aiming to erase and reprogram the minds of psychiatric patients. His methods included administering high doses of LSD, prolonged sensory deprivation, and playing repetitive audio loops for days on end. The experiments left many patients permanently damaged, unable to remember their past or function in society. Cameron's work is a disturbing example of the misuse of psychiatric treatment. Fact 17. The Pavlov's dogs experiment, the birth of behaviorism. In the late 19th century, Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov conducted experiments on dogs to study the process of classical conditioning. By ringing a bell before feeding the dogs, Pavlov conditioned them to associate the sound with food, causing them to salivate at the sound alone. While Pavlov's work laid the foundation for behaviorism, his methods, such as surgically altering the dogs to collect their saliva, were not without ethical concerns. The experiments reveal the power of conditioning but also raise questions about the treatment of animals in scientific research. Fact 18. The Monster Study, Creating Fear in Children. In 1939, speech pathologist Wendell Johnson conducted the Monster Study on orphans to explore the origins of stuttering. Half of the children were subjected to negative speech therapy, where they were harshly criticized for any imperfections in their speech. The experiment caused some children to develop speech issues that lasted for years, if not their entire lives. The study's unethical methods earned it the nickname Monster Study, reflecting the harm it caused to vulnerable children. Fact 19. The Human Radiation Experiments, Exposing the Unwitting. During the Cold War, the US government conducted secret radiation experiments on unwitting patients, often without their knowledge or consent. These experiments involved exposing individuals to dangerous levels of radiation to study its effects on the human body. Many of the participants were already vulnerable, including pregnant women, children, and the terminally ill. The experiments caused significant harm and sparked outrage when they were eventually revealed to the public. Fact 20. The Skinner box experiments, controlled environments. Behaviorist B.F. Skinner conducted a series of experiments in the mid-20th century using what became known as the Skinner box. These boxes were controlled environments where animals, usually rats or pigeons, were placed to study their behavior. Skinner used rewards and punishments to shape the animal's actions, demonstrating the power of operant conditioning. While his work contributed significantly to psychology, the experiments also raised ethical concerns about the treatment of animals and the implications of applying such methods to humans. Conclusion: the dark side of science. The history of science is filled with both incredible discoveries and disturbing experiments. These 20 cases remind us that the pursuit of knowledge must always be balanced with ethical considerations. While these experiments have taught us valuable lessons, they also serve as cautionary tales of what can happen when the boundaries of morality are crossed. Thanks for watching Fact Frenzy Buzz. If you found this video thought-provoking, please like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the shocking and fascinating corners of history and science. See you in the next video.